The one thing, now that I look back on my life, like the one thing that made me realize how shallow my relationship with Christ was at a young age was that I was so easily and quickly influenced by my peers and people that didn't hold on to faith. And it started off with things like complaining to my parents about not being able to play sports on Saturday, not being able to go to friends' birthday parties on Friday night. And it was very quickly from the age of 12 and 13 that I had all of a sudden, fallen outside of the church. I was still going to church, I was still present. I went every Saturday, I was like praise leader, and I was going because my parents were making me go. So at the age of 18, when I went to college, I was just feeling this darkness. There was just a void and like emptiness, and I was so far from Christ, and I had such a shallow relationship with Him when I was young that it didn't even like dawn on me to search to fill this emptiness through Christ. But I saw Christianity as the unintelligent man's religion, that it was based off of faith, off of things that we can't see. And I quickly got into different schools of thought. I studied psychology in university mainly because it fed this desire to give me information on who I am and what the reason for life was. So I'm living in Korea. I was there for about 2 years, but about 6 months before I had come back, I watched this video on secret societies. It led me down like this 5-day intense research on the secret societies and the music industry and their influence on politics and academics and in all areas of life. It sparked such an interest, and I had so many questions that I decided that I had to get to a church. I wanted to talk to somebody religious that could help me figure out these questions and concerns that I had. Now the problem is that I am Korean, but my Korean at that time, it still is terrible. It's not good. And so I had to find a church that had a pastor that spoke English. And so I searched everywhere on the internet. And the problem is that these churches don't advertise necessarily that they speak English. I had a really difficult time finding an English-speaking church. And so I set up prayer. I said to God, if you are real, if you do exist, and I have these questions and you want to share this truth with me, then I'm hoping that as I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm gonna go to the very first church that I find off the internet, and I'm gonna hope that there's gonna be English speaking, and I'm also gonna hope and pray that you send me somebody that can answer these questions for me. I woke up that morning. It was Saturday morning. It was Friday night that I had this little prayer session. And I woke up Saturday morning, and I can't even describe it, but I knew like in my heart that for some reason I was going to be able to not only find a church, but that there was going to be somebody there to help me answer these questions. And so I neighbored the very first church. It didn't say that it was English speaking, but I ended up just going there. And it turned out that that church was the SDA language school of South Korea. Everybody spoke English and Korean there. How strange and how funny is that happened like that. As the church service was ending, I started to come out, and the halls and the doorway were starting to fill up with people as they were pouring out from the sanctuary. When you're not a spiritual person, to be around spiritual people, it's like the most uncomfortable feeling, and I felt so out of place. I was like in a pair of pants and a t-shirt. I had a baseball cap on, and I felt so out of place, and I wanted to leave, and I actually left. I walked out of the church. As I walked out of the church, I took maybe about 10 steps, and it was as if God had put His hand on my shoulder, and there was like a supernatural power, when I look back at it now, that was stopping me in my tracks. And I knew deep in my heart that I had these questions. I came here to look for help, and I came here to look for someone that can help me with these questions. And as I was thinking these thoughts, I turned around, and I was looking at the front of the church. The doors were open. It was summertime. You know, people were spilling out everywhere, and it was as if there were arrows that were pointing at this one woman. And so I go up to her, and you know, I say to her, you know, I'm not from this church. I'm not from this area. I'm looking for somebody that I could talk to. Do you know if there's somebody that you can point me to? And what she said to me was, oh, I'm actually not from around this area either. I'm from America. And I thought, oh, well, you know, I'm actually from America too. And I asked her, you know, what part of America are you from? And she's from the Chicagoland area. You know, I said, oh, I'm actually from Chicago too, and my mom is so-and-so. And she says, you know, she knew my mom. She actually goes to my church. She was, her family goes to my church. And I was shocked, I was stunned. You know, to be honest, I didn't really remember her so much, but as we had discovered that we knew each other from a long time ago, her husband walked around the corner. And when I saw her husband, Dr. An, my heart, it just, you could say it stopped, it exploded. But I knew him. He was so familiar. And it was at that moment, that exact moment, that I realized there is something definitely supernatural that is happening here. This is not a coincidence. You know, down to the church being able to have English speakers, to this man that is definitely sent from God. As time went on, I had many conversations with Dr. An. The craziest thing about that story is that him and his wife were on a mission trip to North Korea. They were only in South Korea for just 2 days, just that weekend. And they were battling, not only battling months ahead of time to go on this mission trip, but they were also battling that Saturday whether to come to church or not. They had just got there at the end of the service. So as I was walking out, about to leave, they had just got there. Now that's a divine appointment. So as I was talking to Dr. An, I didn't have a long time to talk to him. In fact, I just stood with him in line for potluck. But he had reassured to me that he had also studied these secret societies, and that, you know, the things that I was seeing, you know, they were noticed by him as well. Like, I wasn't just going crazy. And it was as I was going home that day, that night, that I realized something that was pivotal in my conversion to Christ. And that idea was, the devil is real. I mean, he's real. He's just as real as you and I are. You know, we might not be able to see him, but he is real. He is living. But the thing is if the devil is that real, God also has to be just as real. What it led me to believe was there's only two decisions that everyone in this earth has. There's only two sides. There's a war that is raging, and it's not with guns, and it's not with, you know, even nuclear bombs. You know, there's a war that is raging, and it's between good and evil, and they're fighting for our souls. And everyone ultimately only has two choices. It is the choice of good, or it is the choice of evil. And to not choose, you know, to choose to not be on one side is leading someone to still be in opposition with Christ. There are only two sides to the picture, and we have to choose. To not choose is to still be in opposition with Christ. You know, I can still remember, you know, clearly that day where, you know, I fell to my knees, and I was looking out at a big, kind of like a bay window that I had in my apartment. And I was looking into the sky, and I poured out my heart, and I told Christ, you know, I get it. I realize that there is only two sides, and I choose to be on your side. And I fully, for the first time in my life, understand what Christ has done for me on the cross, and I accept that. And it was at that moment where I could almost, it was like I could see and I could feel the angels of heaven and the presence of God in that room were just rejoicing with me. And I started jumping, I started hollering, I started screaming. I was so happy, tears with my eyes, but so happy that I had accepted Christ. I smoked cigarettes for 13 years. You know, whether I believed in God or not, I know cigarettes are bad for me. I know that it's unhealthy, and I tried quitting multiple times. And for the last few years of my time smoking, I was smoking almost a pack a day. And from that moment, from that very day, I have no interest in smoking cigarettes. In fact, the smell of cigarettes disgusts me. I used to party, I used to go out with my friends, and I used to think, you know, and I'm not gonna lie, I had fun when I was going out. It was when I came back home alone and you know, hungover that I felt the emptiness. But from that day, He completely loosened the chains of alcohol and drugs and completely just let me go. I had no desire from that moment to drink alcohol. So all these things that started happening and the experience that I had, it basically left me with one thing. That yes, the devil is real. He is fighting for your soul. But at the same time, God is just as real, and He will always prevail. He will always win. When Christ came to this earth, manifested as a man, He went through His whole life sinless to die on the cross for us, and He shouted at the end, "It is finished." You know, He had victory over the devil. And in the end times, in this great controversy, the only thing that overcomes the enemy is the blood of Jesus Christ. You see, this is the funny thing about God is you know, religion, we can evidentially prove that He exists. But scientists at the same time cannot prove that He doesn't exist. No scientist will ever admit and say He does not exist because of this evidence. So the thing about God is He lays in this area of equilibrium, in this middle state. And it's when we personally come and seek Him with all that we have, that we each individually know without a shadow of a doubt that He is real.